Echo Rock the bus behind the 744 Gage Avenue on 750 Gage Avenue. On 4.
Hey, it's Pete and Julie from Rush the Bus, and we have James. And James is from Detroit EMS, and he's retired a few years ago. So he's been out of the game for a little bit. And pretty interesting guy. I talked to him last night. Julie missed it. She was enjoying a bottle of wine or two. so I got to talk to James last night.
I can't say I wasn't enjoying a few drinks myself when I was talking to you.
Yeah.
You know,
Days off. You got to take advantage.
there you go.
So James, thanks for coming to talk to us.
Hey, no,
Stuff like that. So, you know.
you call,
What's that?
you
Jim?
call,
Okay.
Yeah.
My
Or
dad
Jim.
is Jim, and I only knew him as Jim. I think I was like 8 years old before I learned that his name was actually James, you know?
I never really much liked James, and my better half, my girlfriend, we've been together forever. She insists on calling me James, and it
Really?
used to annoy me, and I got used to it. But she's
Yeah.
the only one who calls me that. So,
Wow. Okay.
and oddly enough, our son likes to be called James, even though I call him Jamie. So
Okay.
Okay.
So.
Yeah.
weird, but
Ooh.
I'll answer to anything really. But
Hey, you. All right.
yeah.
Hey, you. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Jim.
You talking about just the job wise?
Yeah, whatever, man. Like, you know, your family life, stuff like that.
Like I said before, we started this. Yeah, I come from a small family. Originally from Detroit, we were transplanted to suburbs, Dearborn, when I was pretty young, and went through high school in Dearborn. And once I graduated high school, like most kids do, I was rebellious and ended up out on my own and back in Detroit. And probably since 1983. And I spent a few years kicking around and finally found myself in EMS. And I started Detroit EMS in, October 9, was it 10? Yeah, October 29th, 1990 was my hire date.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I retired in late 2015. And I stayed in the field doing, working for private ambulance companies. Actually, mainly one, but it changed names several times. I worked for a company called DM Care Express. And I joined that company because they did special events for all the sports teams, Tigers, Red Wings, and they do the Pistons as well. And once I retired from Detroit, I stuck with that. And it's definitely nowhere near the same chaos. It's definitely a different direction from EMS, but still managed to help out here and there, do whatever I can.
So when you came on, what was the process when you got hired in 1990? You said it took a little while.
Yeah. The application process went on for a while. I worked in a hotel and had friends that were involved in EMS. Yeah. They told me, where to go, how to go about it, city, county building, go put your application in. And the process was long because they were like, once you did the testing, they put you on this list. And I guess depending on how well you tested out for the testing, that's where you ended up, high on the list or low on the list. And every time I would call, they would tell me, oh, you're like, number 10 on the list. And then I'd talk to other people who applied and I'm number 10 too. It's like, well, how many number 10s? So yeah, I was constantly calling down there, and I'm quite sure after a while they're like, God damn, we're tired of this guy. Either hire him or just, tell him we're not interested or whatever. So it took a good 6 to 8 months, I think, before
Wow.
Yeah. And then it was, of course, the physical agility test. I had taken that. I think I was halfway done with my EMT program, and they're like, you don't have the license yet? And I'm like, no, I intend on having it. And, so I'm surprised. They were reluctant, but they allowed me to go on the testing. So, Well, believe me, when I found out that I was getting hired, I was on cloud nine.
Yeah.
And then, once you get hired on, you have to go through an academy process, which I'm quite sure it's much like what you guys had to go through.
Yeah.
Which usually was like 12 weeks. And mind you, this is after I already had the license, and you initially you think it's kind of redundant. It's like, why am I going through all this? I already went through this, going through the EMT program, but it's in the time before I got hired on to the city, I got on with a private ambulance company, and you really didn't do things, we didn't.
City way.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
A lot of hospital transfers and stuff, but it wasn't, unless you were doing the 911 stuff, you really weren't getting the experience.
Yeah. So
once I got into the academy, and it's like initially, like I said, this is kind of redundant, but then you start learning things, how to do it, the EMS way, for a municipality, and actually getting out there and, getting your hands dirty. Yeah. It was quite an experience. Some
what do you
days.
remember from the academy that was different from when you were in training? Like, what kind of stuff? Was there anything like, wow, this is
just the physical aspect, really, just doing a lot of lifting, scenarios where you're carrying, the heaviest guys in the class. Of course, me and one of my classmates, he passed away last year, unfortunately. We were the heaviest guys in the class, so we were always the ones getting carried up and down the stairs. And it was scary because, there was some smaller people that were carrying. But between that and some of the different physical stuff was pretty strenuous, and carrying people through a park, having to go up over top of like picnic benches, and they'd create stuff to make it as difficult as possible. And it was tough, but it was fun.
Yeah.
I will tell you that that's a lot more work than we did in our academy.
Really?
Yes.
Well, it's funny.
I don't know. I mean,
I didn't do any of that.
Really?
We had a different, I think what they do currently compared to what they did when I came on in 2006 is a little different anyway, but we did a lot of carrying. Even in my EMT class, we did a lot of carrying, but also the person who did my EMT class was an instructor at, the department.
Mm-hmm.
So, but those are the things that you kind of need to know. Like, you don't realize, especially if you're doing transport EMS, which a lot of us do when we first become EMTs.
Oh, yeah.
Is that, you can't bring a stretcher into every single situation, and you can't just take an old lady to dialysis. You're going to be carrying people who might weigh 275 pounds down 5 flights of stairs, and they're very sick. So it's important, you do need that stuff. Those are important things to do.
And it's funny you should mention that, because there was always this running joke when you hear, say if you go for recertification for ACLS or for, your CPR card or whatever, you'd be in the room with people from different agencies. And it was always kind of a running joke that they talked about EMS. Oh, EMS never carries anybody, EMS, they let their
Wow.
let their chest pain patients walk. And it's like, what you're talking about is we don't know what we're doing. But the thing is, when you know who's really has a cardiac issue and who's just, having some, pain, muscular pain or whatever the case may be, when they need to be carried and when they don't need to be carried. And the amount of runs we do in a year, a month, a day, you try to pick those people and just, you have to know who needs to be carried, who needs to be, pampered in a lot of ways, who needs the most work, who needs the most care and attention.
Yep.
I agree with that. I mean, I think, I was going to say, folks sometimes are expecting one thing. And, a couple years back, I had a 22-year-old with flu-like symptoms, and she lived on a 4th story, walk up, and her friends were really nasty. Oh, you're going to make her walk?
Right.
And in my mind, I'm thinking at that time, I was probably 30 something, and I'm yeah, not to be a jerk, but if you're 22 and you have the flu, it sucks. I'm sure you obviously don't feel well, but you can definitely make it down 4 flights of stairs. But the 75-year-old woman who's having chest pain, or a guy who seems like he's having a stroke, I'm not going to make him walk, clearly, but if you're 23 years old, let's go. You know what I mean? Like, you can get on your feet and let's go. Like, it's,
And then I got into a lot of arguments or confrontations because of stuff like that. And, I'm sorry. It's not that I'm trying to be, cold, callous, or uncaring. It's just that I have to think about my own physical safety.
of course.
Yeah. And to
Of
have to,
course.
if you had to carry everybody on every run, you'd have a short career. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And you know what? You go into these situations, and just like you're saying, a young person with chest pain or, cold-like symptoms, flu-like symptoms for so long, and they're complaining about their chest hurting. And then they're like, oh, I can't walk. And then you look around the room or around the house, you're like, well, I don't see piles of crap anywhere. And you don't look like
Yeah.
your diaper or your pants are soiled. So you had to be getting around somehow.
Yeah, you
know?
definitely got to your bathroom, and you definitely got in the shower, and definitely made your way around your apartment well enough. I mean, it's not about being lazy. It's about being a realist. I mean, you're not going to do this career for 25, 30 years if you carry literally every single person, like you're carrying them downstairs. I mean, because the reality is we're human beings also. We're not robots. We're not, we don't suddenly have super strength where we can carry every single patient we see during the day,
Yeah.
If you get old enough, you just bend over and shit pops.
I know.
Yeah, that was bad.
Yeah.
And stuff pops. I've had the issues like that where I'm sneezing, like pull a back muscle. It's like, oh my,
I know.
how do you get that one?
Yeah. That was bad. Like, we had a seizure job, and I just bent over, and it was so loud. And we were in a shelter. It was so loud, like they thought the guy hit his head. And
Yeah. Yeah, that was unfortunate. I think that week though, we had a lot of carry downs. We had a lot of patients who required like us to actually pick them up. And that specific incident with Peter, unfortunately, was like he kind of just bent over. I mean, the guy had a seizure on the ground. We were just going to try to pick him up, put him on our chair, and get out of there. And that was it. That's all it took, was him to lean forward. The snap that you heard was so loud that the folks at the shelter were like, "Yo, what was that?" And it was like, that's his back, and
Wow.
he couldn't even stand upright. We had to like call another ambulance to come and like take our patient, because we had to take him to the hospital. Like, he was so messed up from that,
Yeah.
And I mean, this is, he's not like an old man, but like he's, you do this job for 20 years, like you're going to have some issues, like it is what it is.
I've had one knee replaced just last fall. I had my right knee replaced because it was completely worn out, and I'm about 80% recuperated from that, and still dealing with the left knee that needs to be replaced. So yeah, I'm
One at a time.
Yeah.
Start feeling that stuff. Yeah. So when people talk about that, oh, you don't carry everybody, it's like you said, be realistic about this. It's not scary.
Somebody was just telling us that they took the bench sheet, or the squad, I don't know what you guys call it, the bench sheet out of the ambulance, and there's no more bench sheet in their ambulances.
So what does that mean? Everybody goes on the stretcher?
I guess we'll find out when we talk to her. But I think that's the craziest thing in the world. Oh yeah.
I mean, it's one thing if everything you've got is like powered, you have a power stretcher, power chair, whatever, but like that's just, it's absurd, like we don't, first of all, and people use ambulances for various reasons. There's a lot of folks who don't have private doctors, and their health gets to that point where like this could very well have been taken care of at an urgent care or a private doctor visit, and they don't have that. But someone who neglected to refill their medications for a week, that person doesn't need a stretcher. Maybe they do. I mean, maybe if it's a possibility depending on what has happened, because they didn't refill their meds, or if you haven't been to dialysis for 3 days straight or whatever, and maybe you're filling up with fluid, I get it. But something that would otherwise require a cab ride is not, to me, something that requires me as another human being to carry you, like it's.
Yeah, but that's just crazy talk,
It's absolute crazy talk.
It is.
Not being realistic.
I know.
Yes.
Mhm. When you started, did you have the 2-man stretchers?
Pardon?
Did you have 2-man stretchers when you started?
Oh yeah.
Oh.
Got down on the side, squatted down, you dropped it down and squatted and picked it back up. Yeah, I did that. Detroit had those for I can't even remember when we actually got the pneumatic stretchers. Probably mid 2000s, late 2000s. Remember, but yeah, we had those types of stretchers where you squatted down and had to pick that up, man, and you struggled. Sometimes you struggled,
And
but
you know,
it didn't hurt.
I
You got a good workout.
you sure did. Like, I do feel like I was in great shape at the time, but I also was in my 20s, you know? So, like, of course, I was strong at the time and, like, it was not bad, but I had 2 female partners. So, like, you know, the 3 of us basically had to, like, make it work for ourselves. So I had this, like, perpetual bruise on my thigh because we would kind of lift the stretcher and then have to, like, lean it on our legs to kind of get around it so we could put it in. So it was like a 2 lift job. Like, you didn't just pick it up and put it in. Like, it sort of had to rest somewhere before that.
It's figure things out. You figure out what's the best and safest way to do it, and you go with it. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of what the EMS is all about, though. You improvise. Everything's improvisation, you know?
Yeah.
There's no right way, you know? And then, like, we don't have any power stretchers. And people are like, I can't believe you don't have power stretchers and stuff like that, and track stair chairs. And I'm like, you know, I was amazed when they came out. I was like, what's this coming to? What's this world coming to? Like, nobody's gonna be able to lift anymore. Now I'm like, I want a power stretcher.
I know.
Like, I've seen them. I was like, I want a power stretcher.
There's those times where you actually have to lift the power stretcher to take it in the house, you know, because there are situations where you can get it in the house, whether it's somebody already has one of those wheelchair porches and the ramps, you know, that accommodate wheelchairs. It's like, well, if it can accommodate a wheelchair, it can definitely accommodate a stretcher.
Yeah.
So we bring it in, and, you know, there's some various times where we had to carry those power stretchers, and I don't know how much extra weight that is, but it's considerable.
Yeah.
It's definitely considerable.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
It's got a motor and stuff, you know, battery or whatever.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It's funny. We're talking about making things work, and I always believed that Detroit. I would always say, you know, Detroit EMS. You know, it's not that we're great. It's just that we're great at improv. You know, you figure things out and you get it done to the best of your ability. It isn't necessarily always pretty, and it isn't necessarily always high tech, but you get it done. So
I think you guys definitely are the kings of improv.
Yeah.
So when it comes to working with nothing, you guys definitely make it happen. So you know, there's a lot to be learned from you guys, because, you know, you guys do a pretty crazy call volume, you know, with no units and some crazy stuff going on. So
I recently I seen some of the statistics that for the last year, or this year I should say, for EMS, especially with, you know, COVID-19 and the run volume on a daily basis. And most of our busiest days of the year would be like New Year's Eve. And we would average 500 runs a night. And regular night, we might average, in my time, was like 300 to 400 runs a day. And more, it's busier in the summertime. But with COVID-19, they were having average days, just like it was, you know, a perpetual New Year's Eve. You know, every day was doing 400 and 500 runs. That wears on you. That stuff really.
Yep.
Absolutely. I mean, I think for us, we had there was a couple of weeks, and luckily it has sort of tapered down, but for us, you know, our normal runs might be 3,500 to, like, I don't know, 4,200 or something. And on, like, 4th of July or New Year's Eve, you get maybe like 5,000 runs. And I think there was like 2 weeks where we're averaging like 6,500.
There was a 72 day in there too.
7,200 jobs. It was just nonstop, and we didn't have the units to deal with that. It was like when COVID sort of first kind of hit, and like people were very, very ill. That was like the first wave of people that kind of died of COVID, and also anyone who had COVID or any symptoms were terrified, and so they called 911, you know. So like that has thankfully slowed down, but yeah, I feel like these are the kind of things that, you know, you try to make it work with what you have, and that's why we ended up getting mutual aid in New York City. I'm not sure what's going on in Detroit right now, but I mean,
they have contracts with I think it's 3 or 4 different private ambulance companies, and at this time I'm kind of out of touch with it now since I'm not on the road and don't work with Detroit anymore. But yeah, we always had extra help, and it's like I was telling Peter last night. There was a time where we were down to 5 units citywide.
Oh my gosh.
The administration and the city, they dropped the ball on getting new trucks and keeping our trucks up and running. Yeah. So down to 5 units, and at the time you'd have 4 and 5 people working on one truck just because you had so many people that had no trucks. So either you're going to go home and use your time off, or you're going to be piling in one ambulance. And you'd come in at 7 o'clock and you wouldn't leave until 9 o'clock some days, and it was nonstop, and it just was never going to end. Yeah. And thankfully, some of the bigger, more or the richer people in the city, those who are really influential. Let's see, who do we have? I can't even think of their names off.
I'm looking it up right now.
Yeah.
All I remember is Kwame Kilpatrick, Mayor Duggan, and
damn, what was that guy's name? Funny, I'm drawing a blank on a lot of these guys' names. Dan Gilbert, he owned a lot of stuff in Detroit. The Illich family, and some of the more affluent.
Oh, Coleman Young. So
Coleman, back. That was when I first started EMS. Yeah. But they all got together and donated money and donated trucks. So we get trucks from a lot of different companies that just were a big part of the city, and they seem to be doing a lot better job at keeping up with the demand for new trucks and equipment. I'm not sure who's responsible for it, but I wish they were around when I first started.
Yeah.
So when you first came out, like, what was it like in 1990? You came out and, I know Detroit split up into 4 sections, and you went where?
When I first came on, most of the guys were old timers, and they were all Vietnam veterans, and it was a little difficult fitting in because you're trying to prove yourself to be qualified, and some of them guys weren't necessarily very warm and empathetic. Yeah. But it was tough. I mean, and the thing is, you'd be citywide. You go from one end of the city to the other, one run after the other. You could, just bounce back and forth. It did, you had a specific geographical area that you covered depending on what firehouse you worked out of. But once it was off the hook, you just had no choice. You were just going everywhere. And, it helped me to learn the city. Like I was telling Peter last night, I got to know the city pretty well to where I didn't need a map or any kind of guidance. I could get anywhere. And, you have an MDT in your ambulance, and it would give you the run location with 2 cross streets. And just by the sheer numbers of runs that you'd respond to, it's that eidetic memory, that kicks in. You're doing it over and over and over again. You get to know those streets pretty well. Yeah. And like I said, at any given time, you could be at one end of the city on the northwest side, and the very next run you do, is all the way to the northeast side or southwest side. There's no rhyme or reason. We didn't have the units to cover, so it was, they did whatever they had to do to get people help. So. Yeah.
And I know, we spoke with Kelly a little bit about that, but at the time, I'm assuming people called an ambulance and then unfortunately had to wait for quite a while sometimes. Were you experiencing a lot of anger, like when you got to these jobs? I'm sure there were people who were pretty annoyed that you guys took a while.
Yeah. You'd come across that quite often. And it was no secret. People knew, there was always stories on the news about it, and they would try. There was a couple different commercials that they put on TV, try to educate the public as to, what's an emergency, what's not an emergency. And it doesn't matter whether or not people are knowledgeable of these facts. They call when they feel they need you. And, it doesn't matter if you feel it's an emergency. To them, it's an emergency.
Yeah.
So, yeah, a lot of times you had to be pretty diplomatic on a scene, trying to smooth things over, because you'd be outnumbered for one. And, you wanted to be able to go home that next, after your 12-hour shift. You didn't want to have to, leave the hospital rather than leaving your, the firehouse.
Yeah.
So, oh yeah, it was tough. And, it makes you angry because you feel like you shouldn't have to be the one, to tell people what's going on. You shouldn't have to be the one to smooth things over, because their loved one needs help or, is dying or having trouble breathing or whatever the case may be. They don't want to hear excuses. They want you to do your job. Simple as that.
Of course.
Yeah.
I do think that's something that across the board and like certainly in our higher volume weeks, like people don't want excuses as to why it took you a while to get there. I mean, because we were doing jobs from our neighborhood in one of the 5 boroughs. We work in Brooklyn, and we were getting jobs all the way out in, the far end of Queens, like near Long Island. It's not even part of New York City anymore. And, you get there when you can get there and you're doing your best. And luckily there wasn't a lot of traffic because people are quarantined, but
like no traffic. We would have never made that.
People don't want you to come there with excuses. They just want you to take care of the situation at hand. And they're angry at that point. They're upset. And it sucks because like it's not anything that you personally are doing wrong. Like you did your best. You got this job and you started on your way. You didn't dilly-dally. You didn't like stop and get something to eat on the way over. You just kind of went and did your job. But it's the fact that folks have been waiting at this point maybe for 30 minutes, 40 minutes. Maybe they called 5 times, And
Right.
so now you're trying to do patient care and sort of like be this diplomatic person in the middle of like, a family situation where people are not too happy with you.
And God forbid you tell them you can't go to the hospital that they want you to go to.
Oh gosh, yeah.
They're already riled up, whether it's your fault or not, they're riled up. And now you're telling them some other bad news that they're not really interested in hearing. Yeah, it can be scary, scary moments.
How often did that happen to you guys? Like where people were super pissed off, that it took you forever, and then you didn't take them where they wanted to go.
Oh, it happened quite often, because regardless of how angry they are, I mean, unless you were in imminent danger, and whether it's just, them vocalizing that they, their displeasure with the service so far, if it wasn't in a situation where you were in physical danger, yeah, you'd have some people that are wanting to call and complain on you, and it's, well, and even if you had a valid reason for taking so long and even though they're pissed off, you have to answer to the complaint. And that would always, that was always kind of something that left a bad taste in my mouth as well. It's like, well, wait a minute, what we're going through. The city knows shorthanded. The city knows we don't have enough units, and the city knows that our response times are bad. Why am I having to answer to this complaint when it's just a generalized complaint that, they took too long to get there? The powers that be can look back at the run and the dispatch ticket and, see where you're responding from and how long it took you to get there. And, they can do the math themselves. But instead of that being the case, you have to actually, you get a formal complaint and you have to write a formal, response to that complaint. So that was, stuff that leaves you a little bitter.
Of course,
Yeah.
It would take days from you guys or, write you guys up?
If they found that you were negligent, I mean, to the point where they would scrutinize, well, what route did you take to get there? Where did you come from? And, what freeway did you go? Or, take the surface streets or the freeway. Yeah, they could write you up and you could get a suspension depending on how how negligent you were. Say you responded no lights and no sirens, and it took you a half hour to get to a run that was 2 miles away. You were getting in trouble.
Yeah, you're gonna get in trouble for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, time off or something like that. So yeah.
Yeah, because I've heard people, they've gotten in trouble because we have like a GPS and it's not always the fastest way. And somebody actually got in trouble for not following, that GPS. And they even said this isn't the fastest way to get there.
Right.
You know, so
That's
Yeah.
the hard thing. I think, you know, back in the day, we more used to like rely on actual physical maps and your kind of knowledge of the neighborhood. And now that we have the GPS inside the ambulance and like on our little MDT, it's kind of wacky. Like sometimes you'll put in, you know, the hospital, give you the closest hospital, and you're like, yeah, that's not a thing, you know, because you're like, the closest hospital is actually a different hospital because I could be there in 7 minutes, as opposed to the one that they're telling me where it would be like 11 minutes. And, you know, maybe mileage wise, it's closer, but like, I'm going to be zigzagging through the streets and this and that. Like, it's much easier for me to just go somewhere else. So,
And for you
know.
guys especially, but I mean, they're not taking in consideration traffic.
Oh yeah.
You know, so yeah, you might have a more direct route going, you know, route A, but then you have a ton of traffic, you know, versus you doing a little zigzag and doing what's best to, you know, actually get where you got to go and meet less resistance. So
That's always the thing too, at like time of day, because our shift starts at 5 p.m. And didn't we like a few months ago, we got like they had questioned why it took us, you know, whatever, 15 minutes to get somewhere, that our estimated time of arrival should have been like 11 minutes. And I was like, you do realize it takes us like 8 minutes to go 2 blocks during 5 p.m. rush hour traffic, you know, like it's not like we're just hanging out, like we're literally sitting in traffic, like there's no way to go, you know, that's it, you know.
you know, the thing is, what bothered me though was the just the name, the term in which you're using, estimated time of arrival. It's estimated. It's not exact.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So I mean, you know, come on now. There's, you know, I sit here and as we're talking about this, I can think of a run that that my girlfriend went on, and it was a high profile run. So of course, it was a young girl who was shot, and I can't remember the situation of why she got shot, but she got shot in the neck, and she was, and this was on the far east side, and they were coming from at least a good 10, 12 miles away, and once again, it's during like rush hour traffic. So what do? Do you take the freeway and get caught in traffic?
Exactly.
Or do you,
there's nowhere to get out.
right. And it became an issue, and they, you know, they put them through the ringer because it was a high profile run.
Yeah.
I remember her telling me about the run, and she, you know, it's one of those that she remembers vividly as the girl, such a sweetheart, even though she's, you know, she's injured, you know, she's critically injured, but she was you know, really friendly and sweet to her when she got there. I think the bystanders and family weren't too happy that it took them so long, but you know, things happen, and you know, it was the wrong time of day, and you know, unfortunately, it happened to her. You know, just it. Well, he said they wanted answers, and you know, things got smoothed over, and nobody got reprimanded. You know, you couldn't really reprimand them because, like you said, once you sit down and look at the facts, and you know, and you realize, okay, there was no easy way to get to her, and they're coming distance, but they want somebody to put the blame on, you know, and it's
you have to, you know,
of course.
it happens, and it's just the nature of the beast, you know. The nature of our work is that we overcome all these obstacles, you know, and it's just sometimes they're easier to overcome. Sometimes they, you know, they aren't so easy.
We always end up making it happen. You know what I mean? Like EMS always makes it happen with a low number of units. You know, like we're still going to answer all these calls, and I'm like, well, you know, since they're answering all these calls, why put on more units? You know, so
we manage with this many units. If we can do this, then we don't need to spend the money. Somebody's got to be a little more I don't know what term I want to use, just more proactive and less reactionary. You know, react. And that was the problem with the city of Detroit in terms of everything, but in terms of EMS, we would go through that on a regular basis. The mentality was just like, oh, they would react to, you know, complaints. They would react to situations, you know, unfortunate situations, instead of in advance trying to, you know, create a situation where the city, you know, had an optimal amount of units and wouldn't have to worry about people dying. no, we're not going to do that. You know, you manage with this many units, you manage this equipment, and we're going to continue to do that.
Yeah.
So.
And it's unfortunate because ultimately that's the kind of stuff that like puts everybody's lives at risk. I mean, it puts the people of Detroit in this sort of, you know, unfortunate position where if they actually require an ambulance, they might have to wait. They may not have the people coming. And then it puts the people who are actually doing the job at a disadvantage because, you know, you're working with less, you are going to these jobs where people might be angry at you, might be unsafe. And you're working really hard, you know, like it's really unfortunate that the higher ups, and I feel like that's Detroit certainly, and it's kind of like a lot of cities across the board, unfortunately. I think for you folks, you had like quite a bit of issues. You know, Detroit specifically had like some real issues, you know.
Yeah, a lot of mismanagement, you know, misappropriation, corruption. We could talk about this forever, you know. And this is like, you know, I looked at some of these suburbs and I'm like, man, they're so lucky. Look at this equipment they have, you know, and the amount of equipment they have. It's like, we've never been there. That's why it always comes down to the mentality. Like I said, you know, it's not that we're great at what we do. It's just that we're great at improvisation. You know, we figure out how to do things and get it done. So it always comes right back around to that. So
that's not a bad thing.
Not a bad thing.
I do think it sort of makes people, you know, when you're sort of struggling with things, you have to kind of like figure out ways to make things work for you. And, you know, so you don't have the most fancy equipment or the most luxurious ambulances or, you know, but you still make it work, you know, like it causes a different part of your mind to sort of activate and figure it out, you know, and.
Well, that's when it comes back to what we were discussing, I think before we went live here, and like I was referred to your videos and learning little tips here and there. You know, you out of necessity, you know, you learn this stuff, and you become good at improvisation out of necessity. You know, and there's something to be said to that for that. You know, you don't get complacent. Because you're always thinking, okay, what's the best way to get this done? We don't have what we need, but we have what we have. Yep. And it makes you a stronger person. And I think those skills, you know, translate to you know, other fields. Whether you stay in the field of EMS, get into nursing, or whatever the case may be, that those attributes, those positive attributes, will go a long way. You know, to carrying a career anywhere else. You know, even if it's not in the medical field. You know, just you have a certain calm about yourself, you know, while other people are either panicking or you know, anxious, have you know, having issues with their job, and you're like, okay, you just don't even realize, you know, some people don't have it as good as you, have the equipment you have the opportunities, have, you know, support, you know, and so it's just you realize that it's a good thing, even though it's, you know, under negative circumstances, you make the best of it and makes you a better person, I think.
And you appreciate stuff when you get new stuff. So, you know, it's like,
oh, we got new, you know, blue bags. You know, we use you know, our jump bag. We'd call it a blue bag. It was just because blue, you know, that was what, for years. And you're like, oh, we got new stuff. You know, it could be the simplest equipment, but you're so thrilled because you haven't had anything new for so long. You know, you're done with what you've done for so long. So it's pathetic in a way, you know.
Yeah. Yep.
Little
we just got LED handles for our laryngoscopes, and that was like, wow. And people were like, wait, you didn't have that? We're like, no.
Oh my gosh, and they are so bright. It's like,
wow.
I feel like shocked by that because, you know, for the longest time we just kind of made sure our light bulb was working, and you know, sometimes
bright and tight.
Sometimes it was dim, but like it was still working. And then when we finally switched to LED, I was like, oh my God, I can light my whole house with this. Like this tiny little bulb can light, you know, 50 feet ahead of me. I was shocked by how amazing it was, you know?
Funny, because I wouldn't even know what one looks like. I've never had one of those.
I mean, the bulb is similar, but
when you tube them, like you can see it through their throat.
Wow.
It's pretty impressive.
Like, oh, you can actually see what you're doing, you know?
If you don't have a flashlight, you can grab this thing.
You know what's funny? My one time I remember having to improvise because my laryngoscope, whether it was the batteries went dead or the bulb burnt out or whatever, and I'm trying to intubate a person. I'm like, oh, great, this is perfect, perfect timing. So I had my plastic stream light, which is, about what, a foot and a half long, and I've got it in my mouth, and I'm into distance here, and it worked. I mean, I got the person, but yeah, wow, LED.
Yeah,
I know.
And now they have like the ones that are like on the cameras, so you don't even have to get in there. So like on a tablet, one guy has them on a tablet and like on the side, and just
that is.
Yeah. I don't know if we'll ever get that, but those are pretty cool,
And you can record it, like when you mess up, like you can see like you missing the cords and everything.
Wow.
Go back.
You're talking about this stuff, and I feel prehistoric now.
It's all right.
So do I, though. I'm like,
No.
this is pretty advanced,
Yeah, but it goes back to that what I was saying. These suburbs, they have smaller communities, and whether or not they're using grants to get their equipment, and they can have some of the most advanced stuff, and it's like I'm jealous. I'd love to have that kind of stuff.
I know, but you also got to remember, like they're only running, maybe 5 units.
Yeah.
So like us, I think it's like 800 units.
Wow.
That's
that is. Yeah. This is. I'm sitting here talking about 500 runs in a day, and it's for us, for the Detroit, that's a lot in a 24-hour period. But yeah, for New York, wow, man, that is an amazing number. The logistics alone is just amazing.
It's an amazing and interesting system. Like to see the dispatch alone, really neat. So to see dispatch and the police side, it's awe-striking to see it.
Lots of moving parts. Yeah.
Oh, I imagine. Yeah. That, like I told you, I definitely, after to talk to you last night, I'm like, oh, that's definitely on my bucket list.
Yeah.
Go do a ride in New York. Yeah. Definitely want to do that.
It's definitely cool. Yep. So we're trying to get out to Detroit. That's like,
I know.
Definitely before it gets too gentrified, we're coming.
Well, still it'll be an experience.
But everybody's gonna move out there from Brooklyn, so they're not gonna afford it. So they're coming.
Yes, happening to Detroit. It happens everywhere. So
Yeah. So Jim, when did you retire from Detroit EMS?
November of 2015.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were you looking forward to it, or?
Oh, absolutely. And I tell you what, in that last year, the closer it got, it seemed like it was the further further away it seemed, because constantly coming up to you. So how many more days you got left? And when's the day? So they never let you forget. And it's no fault of theirs. It's just you don't want to think about it because you just want the time to fly.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm down to 6 months. So I'm down to 5 months and 28 days. It was every day, same thing. But I really looked forward to it. I felt like I was really accomplishing something. And now it's just like, if I had to go back, I don't think I could do it. I don't. It took a specific mindset, and to keep that mindset was even harder. But once I was done, my mind and body, I was done with it. Yeah. So great experience of my life.
I agree, and I think it's one of those things working EMS where it's really exciting. You get to be part of something that's like real, that a lot of people are not part of and privy to, but it requires you almost keep this like mindset going 24/7. And I know, I had a kid and I was out for almost 4 years when I had my son, and it was a little hard to get back into it because it's like that kind of mindset was gone. I had become like a non-EMS person, maybe for the first year or so after being out of work, it was like I was still on that level. But after a while, like Peter could probably tell you, when I first came back and I was his partner, I was a mess. I mean, that's a total mess, So it's sort of like you have to like have your mind in this different kind of realm, which is a lot to keep up with, I think.
Oh, you're absolutely right. It is. And once I retired and I went full time, I retired from one job to go full time at my second job. And, but like I said, it was a different, different speed, doing special events and providing first aid was nothing like being, out on the streets. So I was able to do it. But, they asked me to work the road pretty frequently because they're so shorthanded. And I can't bring myself to do it on most occasions, because it's just that, you have to have your mind in that specific, spot, and you have to, it has to be something that's just perpetual. And once you retire, once you don't have to do it anymore, man, you let that stuff go. And so like you said, it's not immediate, but it does happen. And then to get back to that spot feels like it's almost impossible.
Yeah.
But yeah. So 4 years off, man. Yeah, it's about probably where I'm at right now. Like I said, I'm still in touch with some of the stuff that I used to do, but nowhere near to that same degree. And if I had to go back to work, I'd be miserable. I'd be miserable because it's like when I do find myself in a situation where I'm responsible for, if there is an emergency, I'm constantly thinking, oh man, I can just imagine the worst possible scenario is coming my way, and so I spend that whole shift, on edge, and I just got this angst that you're thinking, okay, something's going to happen, and it's like I said, worst case scenario, and you're setting yourself up there for I don't want to say setting myself up for disaster, but you're just setting yourself up for this negativity that's, most people will be like, why do you think the worst thing's going to happen? Why do you think you're going to have the worst run? Yeah. Just anything's possible.
Yeah. And I think you it's like you end up stressing yourself like way more than you need to be.
Yeah.
I mean, I think my first year back on the street after having my son, we did have kind of a rough year. There were a lot of weird things that happened on the ambulance, but I felt like I spent a lot of time like worrying myself about like horrible jobs that I could potentially get, and like, after a while it kind of became back, par for the course where you're just like take each job as it comes and you don't really worry about what it'll be. But I spent a lot of time worrying, like, what's this going to be? What's this going to be? What's this going to be? And every day was this kind of like, this like high pitched anxiety of like, what's the next job going to hold for me? And, that's not really a great way to live,
No. And I think people don't realize, I think people are starting to really realize it now, but the PTSD that you get from this job and any other job, I mean, this is not the end all be all, but, most jobs have some sort of stressor that people necessarily can't handle. And over time, it does affect them. Yeah. So, but in the field of EMS, I mean, that's basically what we do. We're called, people are having their worst moment,
Mm-hmm.
Most times that we do go, it's something very stressful.
I think even the nonsense beats you up too. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely.
Going to that, like I try to make a game out of it. Like when we keep getting called for like dumb stuff, it is entertaining. I find sheer enjoyment in it a lot of times, and I'm just like, wow. But you have to get to that point where you just realize it's just another job. Don't get mad at it, and just keep it moving. Because being angry at people just burns you out, man.
You just reminded me of something. I remember, and you do have to make things, whether you make it into a game or just do things to, try, ease your mind about it. I remember one year I would take all the gloves that I would wear if it was say if we got canceled on the run or if it was a transport and you didn't make patient contact, and I made a ball. And the ball just kept getting bigger, just like you take a snowball and roll it in and make it. And so I kept that ball. And
really?
On the truck. And like I said, every day it would grow. And it's like, it's like almost like having a pet rock. People are like, why are you doing that? It was just something fine. It was just something to do with the gloves. I don't know.
Yeah. Wow.
That's cool.
That's an interesting one.
I know.
Yeah, we have people that collect ketchup, and they collect ketchup in their glove box. Like,
yeah. So it's the mind. The mind works in mysterious ways, right? Mm-hmm. You do crazy things, and maybe a psychologist could tell you why. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it helped me through the day,
That's fun. How big did your ball get? Do you still have it?
No,
Or just
no.
throw it at somebody. I was throwing it at somebody when I retired.
One, I was like, why am I doing this? And I ended up throwing it away. But
Oh,
it got to be about almost a foot in diameter. Yeah.
wow.
That's pretty
But it
entertaining.
didn't take too long to get that big either.
I'm sure.
Yeah, I can't remember what year. I probably should have put a label on it, and I should have kept it just for for keepsakes. But wow, yeah, that's kind of weird. Now that I think
It's a
But you
good
know
one.
what? I could see, I feel like there's times where like we go on a job and I put my gloves on. Like most times I don't put my gloves on unless I know it's like an active cardiac arrest or whatever, where I'm gonna need to like act immediately. I just kind of like wait on it a little while. And then when we get into someone's home or wherever we're going and I'm like, oh, okay, this is gonna need gloves, I start putting them on. And like, so when I don't need them, I'm like, like I wasted my gloves, you know, and I get like, so kind of like, ugh. And it's just a silly thing that I can replace easily enough. But like, I always like to have a certain, you know, amount of gloves with me. So,
oh, absolutely.
you know, if I could see like taking those and like doing something with them that feels like a little more productive than just tossing unused gloves in a garbage, you know?
Yeah, maybe that's what I thought. I wish I could remember why I rationalized that it was important to do. But yeah, and you're right. You know, you sit here and think, you know, I'm not a wasteful person. I don't want to just keep throwing gloves away, you know, even though I'm not the one purchasing them, but it's still, you're a responsible person and you're doing something with them. So yeah, kind of crazy.
Yeah, because we get our gloves from like 2 certain hospitals that we really like. So sometimes we get a box, sometimes we don't. And hold on.
I'm sorry, I see like children in the background.
Oh, so wait a minute. You guys, your supplies or equipment it comes from the hospitals?
No. Technically, our equipment comes from the department, and they have gloves that, you know, it's funny. Like years ago, we had gloves that were thick, and I liked them. They were nice, and now we have gloves that are thick, but they don't feel as comfortable. So I prefer the ones that like these 2 hospitals in our area have. So I always, when I go to that hospital, as I'm like, I'm like triaging, I'm like taking the gloves and like rolling them up and putting them away, and you know. And then every now and again we get like a trip to one of the veterans hospitals, and they have the best.
They have really nice gloves.
They're like super nice, and they have like aloe and everything, and so I try to get as many as many. But those are the ones that if I take it out and I realize like, oh, I'm not gonna need to touch this person, I like roll those back up and put them away, because I'm like,
oh, those are precious, huh?
Yeah, those are precious. I'm not throwing those out. Those are a hot commodity. So, you know.
I remember, yeah, we always used to get the cheapest of gloves. I mean, sometimes they were really difficult to put on. They weren't vinyl. They weren't rubber gloves. I can't remember. They were like true vinyl, and trying to get them to fit, you know, you'd tear more of it. You would always appropriate gloves from the hospitals, you know, and of course, you know, we didn't have any kind of program with the hospital where, you know, you get a box of gloves or whatever. We could get from the hospitals were C-collars and bug boxes and stuff. So yeah, so you're putting them up under like a sheet or something like that and trying to wheel the stretcher out. And I just remember there was a charge nurse at Detroit Receiving Hospital, which is our like, you know, biggest trauma center in Detroit. And I remember this charge nurse, when she was on duty, she didn't miss a thing. You know, you're stretcher out and you're thinking you're hiding this box of gloves, and she's like, hey, what do you got up under there?
Oh my gosh.
I could never get past her. She'd always catch these gloves. And she, you know, she was kind of a hard ass, but she was nice. She just knew she had to be tough.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it was always like, damn, one of these days I'm gonna get.
I know there are some of them that act like you're taking something from their personal closet. Like you have like one more sheet, or you'll be like, oh, hey, is there a sheet closet? And they're like, oh, it's locked up. Give me your sheet. And you're like, can I just get a sheet? And they're like, no, 1 for 1. And it's like, okay, I get it. You know, I'm not trying to steal 20 sheets, but
it's funny because Henry Ford Hospital, it was kind of a 1 for 1 deal. And they had this one guy, one security police officer, and I couldn't even remember his name to save my life. But he didn't really fit in. He was a very large guy, and he looked like he was about to keel over at any time. But we used to call him the sheet sheriff. because he was the only one around that would make a big deal if you took a couple extra sheets or whatever. You know, he'd come over,
Gosh.
up the stretcher, and we called him the sheet sheriff because that was his big thing. You know, it was his pet peeve, I guess. So,
Yay.
It's the same shit everywhere.
Yeah.
It's the same shit. Like I heard a fight. This one crew, they took like a pile of sheets, and the nurse is like, "Yo, why are you taking so many sheets?" And he's like, "What do you care? They're not your sheets." And she's like, "You have a whole like a stack of sheets." Like,
right.
She's like, "Yo, if you take 2 or 3, I don't care." She's like, "But you have a pile of sheets."
Yeah,
Yeah.
you don't do
And-
stuff like that. You know,
Yeah.
it might be something that you're like, oh, I realize I don't have any sheets on my bus, so I'll take one for my stretcher, and I'll take, 2 to put in the ambulance, and maybe a blanket because it's cold out or whatever. But you're not going to take like 20 sheets because then that makes you a jerk. Like you just take what you need. Like it's not free for all.
Yeah. And it turned into like a whole brawl.
Maybe they're building a fort back at the firehouse or what.
They could.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. And I mean, sometimes we do replace them with a couple because, like, we have a lot of homeless folks in New York, and actually, like in the last like couple of years, it seems to have gotten a lot worse. Where there's like people who are legitimately on the street, like not in the shelters. So it's like in the winter we tend to give a lot of sheets out just because it's like, let's pass these along because we have them. But then you end up at the end of the tour and you're like, we got no sheets, like so.
You guys have a blanket saga?
You know what? I was gonna bring that up after he was done. Yeah.
Yeah. You got to hear this one. This was I'd get in trouble because I get blankets out a lot.
Yeah, it was one of those situations where the person was, in need of a blanket, and we are issued like 2 wool blankets on each truck. And he, the guy needed something, so he gave it to him. And he got reprimanded, and they wanted to give him a set of charges for that.
What?
And it got to be a big deal. And he actually went on the news, and then these other people in not from Detroit EMS, but from other agencies got involved. And next thing you know, they had like this blanket drive down at the not the city county building. It was at the fire headquarters. And we were all down there. People were dropping off piles of brand new blankets, used blankets.
Wow.
It was a big issue, and it was just it made national news. And it's just like, wow, over blankets.
Yeah. But you know what? I mean, it seems so ridiculous, but thank goodness it kind of went that far because it is sort of ridiculous. Like when my first job ever as like a teenager when I was 15 was at McDonald's. And I literally had my boss yell at me in front of customers about giving too many napkins away. And he brought me to tears. I mean, I was like a 15-year-old. It was my first job. And the 2 women who I was helping were like, he's a dick. Fuck that guy. You know what I mean? Like, and I was so upset because it was like, this is my first job. I just got yelled at. He yelled at me in front of people. And I feel like I get that we can't just be giving away equipment, but it's not like you're giving away a stretcher. Like, here, you need a bed, buddy. Here you go. If you're giving someone a blanket because they're like out in the street and it's friggin' freezing in Detroit, like that should be the end of it,
Or you say, okay, well, I got to go, so give me my blanket back. I mean, come on.
Yeah. What did you do? Did you like wash them?
They would take our blankets and they would send them out to one of the prisons that was in the city
Okay.
and have them laundered that way. And but the thing is, after that, we had truckloads of brand new blankets that were donated.
Yeah.
I mean, we had tons of blankets. I mean, you could literally give one to every person in the city of Detroit. They had that many.
Wow.
And because people realize, I mean, people are going to need this stuff.
Yeah.
And you can't have that mindset that, oh, no, you can't have this. This is for our trucks only, You got to show a human side,
Of course. And I think ultimately I get that, there's dollars and cents built into any business, but the reality is our business as providers is to help people and advocate for our patients. And I think handing someone a blanket because they're cold is patient advocacy, It's like, it's pretty ridiculous. Like, I don't personally, I mean, I know I'm supposed to care about like getting people's insurance information and all this other stuff, but like at the end of the day, the reality is my job is to do patient care. So it's not really my job to track people down to try and bill them for, the services I'm doing. And I don't really care much about that aspect. I mean, I know that it's part of it, but that's not really like my thing. So, giving someone a blanket, I don't know. It's just,
And and the thing is, those higher ups, they forget that they are just a part of the same machine. They're just another cog that's supposed to keep things moving and provide services for for the public, for the general public and the citizens of the city you're working for. It isn't just their job to oversee what you do. They're responsible just as much as you are.
Yep.
And if they're forgetting that, then I guess something like this is a true reminder of that. Made them look petty.
Of course, yeah. Because it is, like.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, hell, if you get into this field of work, you like helping people, and in most cases, you'd probably want to give them the shirt off your back if you could.
Yeah.
To give up a blanket is nothing. But he said so. Yeah, and them this situation blowing up into what it did become was definitely necessary for those that are in charge, the penny pinchers, the bean counters or whatever, for them to see that, we do have to account for some, human aspect.
Yeah.
And, where would we be if we didn't? We are supposed to be in the field of helping people and helping other human beings. So this, it's a cruel reminder, but it's, it helped. It worked. And, I was surprised you did your homework. You looked that up, huh?
I know. I'm a bit of a dork. Yeah. I Facebook stalked Kelly. That's how I got Kelly. So I've seen that years before, and I was like, when we started a podcast, I'm like, I'm gonna get her on our podcast. So,
she's
Facebook
a good person. She is a good person. She helps. She did a lot of work with helping with dogs, stray dogs, and she still does. So it's people in this line of work. There's some really good people. There's some people that may have gone astray and forgot why they're here, but we have a lot of good people that want to help people and help their fellow man. So
so we've been going for an hour. So so we're gonna refill it. We're gonna take a quick break and we'll get back with Jim. So
I'll be here.